Live.
We're live.
Yes, it's been a while. I don't remember how these things work anymore.
Yeah, it's been a minute because we've just had a lot of travel going on for the last little while, and it's just been hard to coordinate.
Yeah, and we did mean to stream again in Edinburgh, but then I was super sick, and it was also just super chaotic. So yeah, we couldn't find a space to do anything.
Exactly. And I think that's the largest challenge when trying to do a conference. There's so much going on within the conference itself that there isn't even a moment to try and focus in on another project or something, much like this. I mean, we did manage to make that Twitter space work. Um, but live streaming takes a lot more. Like, you just have to have the right lighting, the right quiet room, connection, whatever. But yeah, so it looks like, was that your iPad? I'm not sure.
Yeah. I managed it. I just had to restart every single device I have, and then. But yeah. Right. So I think a good thing about the fact that we didn't do this for some time, I think, is that even the yeah, pretty much. I had a lot of time to think about this, and I just miss coding so much. I was like spending my entire weekend just like thinking and doing and evaluating tools and everything. So it's like,
Right.
yeah, coming back refreshed, which I think is great.
Hey,
There's an
Tiffany. How's
amazing
it
emoji thing.
going?
Is that, do they call those, what do they call those
Yeah, I
in
think
Twitch?
Twitch, like emotes or something like that. I'm not sure. Tiffany can probably tell
Emotes,
us.
yeah,
And hello, Pie Master. How are you doing?
probably excellently because we just had dinner. Um, so I was thinking that today we can talk a little bit about the architecture. Well, first of all, maybe what is it that we want to build? Because that was an important question that Pie Master asked last time. Like, what is the thing that you actually want to do? Like, yeah, like have fun. But it does help if we understand kind of like what the goal is, what the app or the service or whatever it is that we want to build. Yeah, so
Yeah.
I mean, like, I have an idea, but I don't know if you have any ideas.
Well, I know that you were talking about certain ways you wanted to approach, building out this app in JS. So, I mean, I'd love to hear from like what you had to say. Like, I know you shared a lot of this over like DMs and stuff, but if you want to publicly talk about it, because I mean, this is the learning in
You're like, oh,
public,
I'm too
right? Like
tired.
what we're, um, but if you can summarize it at the very least, like how did we end up with, the fact that we're going to use Svelte to make this all possible? And,
I'm not even
what
that
are we
far
even trying to
yet.
do? So we're trying to build a karaoke. I
Yes.
know.
So the first idea is
Um,
just that we have an app that um, suggests karaoke songs to you, because that is something that happens to me, at least, that I'm at a karaoke bar, and then it's like, what do I want to sing? I can't always sing the same 3 or 4 songs. I mean, I can, but it's just not that fun. So just have like a random karaoke song generator thing. Just saw you sending out that message to every single channel.
I know. So some people are probably going to go visit your channel and wonder like who you're saying that to. But anyways, I agree with that. Like we could go a couple of different routes, and I think like we either could build our own database. The thing that really stuck out to me was like, how do we make sure we're not violating any sort of copyright laws? Because I noticed that um, a lot of the like karaoke songs for any of the like places we've been to, they don't use like the original versions, right? They use kind of remade versions. I don't know how they remade them. So
Were you suggesting to actually stream the songs? Because I thought it would just give you like the names of songs, and that's definitely not copyright.
Well, yeah, giving us the names of songs is one thing. I think to further extend it out, right, or where this actually goes is how do we like play those songs? Now we've got suggestions, or now we have, a suggestion based off of the criteria we put in for the various genres from. Oops, what was that? What does that mean afterwards? Like, where are these songs going to be played? Is this going to hook up to maybe a local system, or I'm not sure. I mean, that's what we're here to figure out, right?
I think that's like a million steps ahead of what I'm thinking. I'm right now just thinking like, let's just give me I'm just gonna press a button and I'm just gonna say, hey, this is a song that you could sing now, pretty much. Like I'm 4 beers in, give me a song. It's like, oh, this sounds like a song for you. What are our go-to karaoke songs? Yes, we talked about this last time, and I could share maybe my screen because just to show where we were at last time, this was our app in its current state. It's a JavaScript app, and all it does is it returns a website that gives you this hard-coded list of 4 songs. And this is like, these are our 2 go-tos. I mean, we sang this together finally in Edinburgh. That was beautiful.
It was
I was
awesome.
really, really sick, but I was still giving it my all. So these are good go-to songs, and I don't know if we're gonna do karaoke at KubeCon as well. There's a lot of shit going on, but I found some karaoke bars.
Yeah, I mean, there will be folks that will, definitely be down. It all depends on when it happens. Which, if you don't mind, let's quickly talk about that. Like, when do you think we could actually do karaoke next week?
So I saw my favorite that I saw was a piano karaoke bar. It's a piano bar, and they invite people to sing with the piano. That sounds amazing, and they're open like Wednesdays through Saturdays or something like that. So sounds like something that we could do maybe after the All Attendee party or something. I'm also there Friday evening. I don't know if you're gonna go back on Friday.
That sounds
and then
fun.
I mean, if anyone's from the West Coast, I'm going to actually travel to LA the week after. So if you have any suggestions for karaoke bars in LA, I'm definitely down. I hear Koreatown has both the best food and the best karaoke. I'm definitely going to check that one out. But anyhow, so coming back to the app, and I think maybe this is now the time that I can try and share my tablet, because what I did is I hooked up my iPad to this MacBook here so I can share and I can draw stuff. So this will be like a little bit of a whiteboarding session. So basically the idea I have is that we're building a web app, right? So we have like, oh, this is working perfectly already. So you're gonna take my finger, but not my pen. Okay. So we have a web app here. And as a user, this is my website or web app, whatever. I'm going to request songs from our backend. And in the backend, we have some kind of like recommendation system, right? And that can be also, we can like talk about all kinds of stuff. You were mentioning machine learning, for example. It could be, we could start with something super simple, which is just randomly picking a song out of like a list of songs, right? And then maybe filtering, like we could have filters like pick a male artist or something like that. So we have a rec system, and then there's like some kind of database behind it. And that is the simplest architecture that I'm thinking of right now. So we have like the thing that belongs to the web, that's just purely how do I display stuff and how do I take requests. Then I have the recommendation system that kind of figures out what I'm going to recommend to you. And then we have the database I'm not going to say it's only the database. There's probably needs to be some kind of API also to retrieve stuff from the database. That is just holding the songs. So that's, are you with me so far? Is that does that look like a good architecture to you?
It does. Now, curious, are we building that database, or is that going to be somewhere that we source it from?
That's a very good question. I don't think we can build a database. I mean, like, I cannot build a database. That is a lot of stuff that I don't understand. I think I was hoping that maybe next time we can like invite someone who knows about databases and data structures to tell us like what would be even a good structure. So from what I know, and these are just the ones that I know, we could do SQL, right? That's very like just tables and very straightforward. We could do NoSQL, so maybe something that's more document based. So a song could be like a JSON document, or we could do GraphDB or GraphQL. Actually, don't know what the right word here is. So these are the three that I know of, and they obviously each have their advantages and disadvantages. And what I would like is to get someone to tell us about databases. Why would you choose this database over this? What is a good use case for this? And then also can help us decide how should we run it? Should we just use AWS or Google Cloud's database offering? Or do we want to host it on our Kubernetes cluster, for example? So I don't know yet. I've played around with it a little bit over the weekend, and I just signed up for Google's Firestore, I think. It's a document database.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I don't know. How about you? Do you have any thoughts on just data structure databases?
So, it really comes down to what or how much we want to be responsible for when we're trying to manage and scale this application down the line. I bring that up because if we decide we want to run our own database and run it on top of Kubernetes, what kind of operational overhead are we looking at versus using a managed service that has been tried, tested, and true, works very well, and will service exactly what we want, right? There's a few ways to look at it. But at the same time, I'm not a database expert. So I don't know, what the right solution might be. I mean, it's easy enough to go deploy Postgres or MySQL to Kubernetes, but then what happens afterwards is the real question.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, just like very, very basically looking at this from a very simplistic view, it would be kind of like if we use a service, like a managed service, we don't have to worry about too much of this data structure and, like keeping data safe and all of that. But then every different environment that we want to deploy to, we have to think about how to access that service, right? Like for Google, for example, you use the Google CLI, the Google Cloud CLI on your local machine, you log into it somehow. And then when you run the SDK in your code, it will just magically authenticate with Google. And when you're in production, obviously that's different. So you have to figure that out. Whereas if you run it on your own Kubernetes cluster and you deploy everything together as like microservices, then you don't have that difficulty probably because you just have a production instance of everything. Maybe not. I mean, yeah, it would be really good to have someone with more database experience to kind of teach us about that. So, okay, that's the database part. Then this middle part, I said like rec system, but actually this was like much bigger, and I wish I had like a better eraser for this, but here we are. So technically, if this is only the database over here, what we need on this side, what is this? What we need on this side is actually, because this is just, if this is the entire backend, what we actually need is, we need a layer that's DB access. So something that accesses the database, maybe transforms the data when it comes out of the database into like some other format that we want to use it with. And then we have like this this recommendation system. Wait, that's not right. So we have a recommendation system here, and we have the API here. So the web app would be talking to the API, and then the API would either go to the rec system would go to the database or the database access layer, or the API could get the database, get the stuff from the database, and then talk to the rec system. So the API kind of like orchestrates everything, or the API just defers to the recommendation system, and the recommendation system does all the data stuff. Are you still following me?
I'm following you. Yeah. I'm actually curious, right? Like, would the API system end up being a bit of a bottleneck, especially as many requests come in? And what can we do to mitigate that?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And I think that's very much on point, because that's probably what's going to happen. The API will probably have the biggest load, which is why it makes sense to separate it out from the other services here, because then we can scale it up if we need to. We could do things like cache stuff, so we don't have to always like start big requests. So I'm sure PyMaster can like tell us more about that, because he's pretty knowledgeable about AWS. But apparently, if you use specific AWS services like API Gateway, you can cache or have the browser cache responses. So the browser is supposed to make a request, but because the last time it got a response to that URL, the response said, you know what, this reply won't change for the next hour. So if you're going to make a request next time within the hour, just take the request that you already have instead of actually making a request to the API. So you could cache on client side, you could cache on the API side. So you would invoke an API call, but you wouldn't actually go to the database or go to the recommendation system, because again, you would just like get this response that you already had. And that, I guess, would be nice if we were using cloud providers for that, because they are very good at these things, and I'm not. But would also be interesting to see what we could build.
Yeah. So I think that, even in front of that API, you could probably stick an API gateway or something that'll intercept all the requests coming inbound and even provide that caching that you just suggested. But one of the other things that you can do is we can even implement some rate limiting, so that we can prevent any sort of barrage of requests that are inbound, and queue them effectively, so that they'll still get responded to, but it's not going to be an immediate response. But then that brings up another question. Okay, if now people have to wait for the response, what's the answer to that? Like, how do we increase the response times? Do we start to scale up that API? Do we maybe give it more resources? I don't know. There's a lot of here's where the interesting stuff comes in, right?
Exactly. And it depends also a lot on what kind of requests are you getting, where are you getting them from. Oh, oops. Hey Carrie, good that you joined Telegram. So like, for example, do you get a lot of requests from all over the world, or are they all coming from the US or something, right? So it's good that we're talking about this now, so we can build it in a way that we can address it when we have the information to know how to make that decision. It's just like, it's kind of difficult right now because we haven't settled on the architecture yet, so we don't actually know where the load will be coming from. But definitely something like a rate limit, or just using the cloud vendor tooling is probably, especially if you're starting with things, right? It's probably good to do. I do not know if I would recommend to anyone, hey, just build everything by yourself in Kubernetes, unless you are running a live stream and you want to, your express goal is to run things in Kubernetes.
I agree. I mean, we're here to learn, right? We're here to kind of discover whether or not everything is perfect for Kubernetes, or is Kubernetes the right tool for what we're trying to do. There might be a point in time where we decide, maybe we just hand this off to a platform that just does all the plumbing and just operational care behind the scenes, and we're just going to run code. So that's another decision point. But I don't think we're going to get to that level, because these managed services can also be very costly in a lot of other ways.
Well, so there's a question that we don't have to answer, but we can address right now, which is that, do we want this thing here? This is our backend app pretty much. I mean, the web app is kind of like, let's just ignore that for now. Do we want that to be a thing that runs the entire time, i.e. a workload on Kubernetes? Or would we just only want to invoke that when someone calls it, so we could run it in like a serverless fashion, for example?
I actually like that idea. The question is, are we ready for that? Like, could we even get to that point where we're ready to just run this as serverless containers on some sort of platform? Heck, we could use Knative or something like that to do this. But then the other element is, now we're adding a layer of complexity into what we're trying to do. We're going to have to go learn Knative or its equivalent if we're sourcing this on Kubernetes. Or we could also use some sort of functions as a service through some provider. There are options.
Yeah, for sure. Like, I've not used Knative yet. I've played around with it with OpenFast for a while. Hey, Jackie, thank you. And I mean, it works, but I haven't found like a use case where I'm like, I want to run functions, but I definitely want to run them on Kubernetes. It makes sense if you have some workloads that run as containers, for example, and you have some that could run as functions, and you both want to have them on the same infrastructure. That's 100% a use case where I would say, yes, go for it. But like in our case, I don't see it making sense unless you get free compute on Kubernetes specifically, or something like that. But that's also a valid decision, I think. When I was working at the consultancy, a lot of times we're talking about how do we do things in this specific way because we can save money, because we get free credits if we go to Azure or whatever. I think that's a valid reason as well, right? Like money is a valid reason just as much as like technological reasonings are, in my opinion.
Well, it's great that we're having this discussion, because there are even ways to use like on-demand or spot instances, for example, to accomplish what we're trying to do as well, without giving up all of that control to, let's say, a managed service for functions. And we can still probably find a good balance. So let's just say, for example, we use spot instances to run our Kubernetes cluster, which means we'll have some automation in there to spin up a node in the cluster when we need it. And if it's not needed, then the spot instance will be terminated. Jackie, am I right about that? I should be right about that. I think
So if anyone from the chat has anything to add, oh, there we go. Someone has something to add.
PyMaster. On AWS, you could do something like Lambda and ECS/EKS on Fargate, in case you want to go mainly serverless, but have some workloads that are longer running. That's a good point. There's a lot of different ways we can go for this, right? And Avinash has another point to bring up here. Would one use serverless for APIs that have regular traffic? If it's consistent traffic, maybe serverless might not be the right tool, especially if we expect it to come in all the time, because there's the other elements of, now we have to wait for an API to come up and become available, and that might create like latency in the overall request flow. So maybe go ahead, sorry.
No, it's okay. For Lambdas, you pay for invocation, right? So it's like, depending on how often you invoke a Lambda, like this is very specific to Lambdas, but I'm sure it's similar to the other cloud providers. Kubernetes will be cheaper for you, because then there you pay for control plane per hour or something. So maybe not if you have, like, it depends on what regular means. If it's regular to the point that it's like 3 times a day, maybe that's okay. But if it's like just constant, Plus, also, as Marina said, there's this problem in serverless that's with the cold starts. So it takes some time for Lambdas to start up. So if you want, like to get a reply fairly quickly, you probably, might want to consider having some cache before. So when your Lambdas start up, they you can access that cache first, but then obviously that also costs you time, like resource and money.
So Stacy Clouds has a comment here. I don't know if the front end is going to be SPA, but with Azure SWA could be interesting with the design. I'm not sure what SPA or SWA stand for.
It's a single page application.
Okay. And
it
what
just means that everything's it's just rendered in one. So basically, everything's just one page to the browser, and you're not like switching between different pages as you would do that in the past. Pretty much, that's how we built websites in the past. It's just like you go from one page, you navigate from one page to the next, but now everything's kind of on one page, and just stuff gets rendered on the same page. Pretty much, that's the difference. I hope I'm not misunderstanding what it is. But if I am, let me know. I'm not quite sure what SWA is. Azure SWA.
Maybe single web app. I don't know.
Maybe could be interesting. Either free to. I mean, it probably will be a single page application. That's about right. Okay, that's good enough. Close enough for me. Because it's probably not going to have like a super lot of stuff happening in the web application, because I think most of the logic will be happening kind of here in our magic stuff. I don't know if my what's going. Oh wait, most of the magic is probably going to happen here in the web app. What I'm guessing we will have is just like get like just a REST API. So we will just give me a song, and then maybe we want to add songs, like put new songs into the database, but we probably won't have a lot of fancy stuff going on in the front end. I mean, maybe, again, if we find a front end developer who wants to really get into that, we can. So if we're going to just jump to the front end part of this real quick, I did look at different frameworks right now, because it's been a while since I worked with front end, and there have been like 4 new frameworks that I've never heard of before. I checked them out. Svelte was the one that I felt like confident enough to actually build something with it. Also because their tutorial is super good. It is really, really nice to get into, and they introduce the concepts of how to work and how to think about the architecture of your front-end application just really gradually. So even if you don't have any development experience or just very little, it's really, really nice. So I was thinking like that's how I pick my technologies. It's also like, how much help can I get if I run into an issue? So okay, that's interesting to see that there's an Azure Static Web App service, and then you can, if I understand Stacy correctly, you can then attach it to functions, to like call functions, or defer requests to container apps. I guess it's just like a service where the web app is directly tied to other workloads in the Azure cloud. It's nice that we have this diversity of cloud knowledge, because PyMaster apparently knows a lot about AWS. Stacy is an Azure, I don't quite know what they call it, Azure MVP, Microsoft MVP. Oh my god. Okay, you want to read this?
Yeah, that was a little. It was covering your screen there.
Okay.
Okay. It is kind of hard. It is a kind of a hard challenge to decide what to use if you have little to no indication about requirements. Anything is possible, usually in more than one way. And you're absolutely right about that. I totally agree with that. I honestly sit here and think like we could probably do this 1,000,001 ways. But I think there's an element of trying to find the right balance. I think, and you also said it really helps if you can narrow down requirements like global availability, hard, soft customer requirements, as well as technical limitations, assuming you don't want to do 100% new stuff. Also, keep in mind that with the right architectural approach, you can make changes as your understanding of problem solution space increases. I totally agree with that. The thing is, like, as we're building this out, like, we're going to also run into our own constraints and realize maybe we can't do it this way. Maybe the usage of like an external database as a service might not be the right tool for us. I don't know. We'll probably reach that point and decide at that point. Stacy Clouds has another comment here. It just makes your front end and back end look like one application to the outside world. Totally true. And then there's another point. Functions are the standard API, but you can customize it if you want to pay a bit more.
I see. So the Azure SWA is kind of like, the idea is that you work with functions, and then if you want to work with Kubernetes or containers, then you can pay them a bit for it. Okay. I just wanted to add to the point that PyMaster made. I think it's a great point, and but it's also like, that's the reason why we're discussing it now. We don't have to decide necessarily, but we have to know that we might need to make these decisions later, so we can decide on architecture that will allow us to easily, or like not too hardly, change things in our architecture. That's why I'm also thinking, like, if one of the things about choosing a cloud vendor right now, you have to kind of be stuck with vendor lock-in. It's like in the serverless world, it's it's a perceived problem, because you decide, okay, we're going to build this in Lambdas now, and then you're kind of dependent on AWS, and it's going to be a bit more work to move it out into a different cloud. Whereas if you're using Kubernetes, you can theoretically run it anywhere where you can run Kubernetes. So in any case, we just need to know which decisions might be ahead for us to make, and then decide on a way to start that will allow us flexibility for down the road. So what is the minimum viable architecture you can think of? So I think the minimum is like one here, one there, and then one here.
Yeah, so and I was just going to add to that. I see this as like, what, 3 either virtual machines if you live in the virtual machine world, or even 3 containers that can run pretty easily inside of Docker, just for initial testing, right? Like, we have to test out that our app actually works and functions. Running it in production becomes a totally different story. And PyMaster is actually completely right. We haven't even gotten our app off the ground, and we're talking about infrastructure constraints right now. And that's my bad.
Like, it's a container.
We
have an app. It lives in a container.
So, yeah, that's true. We just have to iterate on that container at some point.
Yeah. I think that is the minimum viable architecture right now. Right now, what we have is, maybe I should start a new one. So right now, what we have is we have one container, and that is delivering the web app and taking requests. So that's also the API. And also, I mean, it has also the data. There's no database yet, but it does these 3 things already. So when I said one here, one here, one here, those are the 3 things, I think. The data, the client application, and then the API, that kind of the back end, whatever you want to call it. And right now we have a container that kind of like does everything in one. And that is the minimum viable architecture that I can think of at the moment. But I think we're gonna actually, this is right now in this second, but I think, like I said, next week or next time, I would love to get this data out, and then we have a data retrieval layer here, and then the actual database is somewhere else. But it could still be in the same container, right? I just don't think it should, but like in theory, we could still run everything in one container. Just to finish off my rant, I think it should be a container, just because it's easier than going to functions already right now. What do you
Yeah, I
think?
think I agree because one, like I think between us two, that's probably where we're most familiar with and what we've worked with for the last little while. Um, Going to the world of functions, it's a nice to have, but maybe that becomes, what happens after production, kind of a sequel series or something like that. How do we take this and run it as functions next? But you're right. Let's start with this. We have a container. We need to find a way to move that data out, and then build a retrieval service, an input-output mechanism that just communicates to that database and gives us what we're looking for. But then this becomes a static database. So you did mention some things around, how that data looks in the database versus how it should look and be transformed outside, right? So, like, how would that work though? Like, what is it that we'd have to do in order to transform that data?
It really depends on what we want to do with it. So if it's SQL, for example, then I think the most common thing that you would do is you have to maybe merge two tables into one model. Like you have a model that, for example, you have like songs and you have artists, and these are two separate tables. They have to be because they have different properties. And then in your backend, what you want is maybe you want to have a song that one of the properties is the artist. So you have to like merge these two data points into like one data point. That's one thing that I think. That's what I'm thinking of immediately. With NoSQL or like document databases, that might be a bit simpler because a document could have anything in it, and even if you have documents in the same table, they don't have to look the same. So you can have artists and songs in the same table. You can have artists within the songs without having like a relation necessarily. So you could just have every song could have the artist information in the song document, and you don't have a reference to an artist document like you would do in SQL. But you might still want to, like, maybe it's just like a simple thing of you get a string from because the document, and you want to turn it into an object. Like that could be the data modification that you're doing here. And if we're doing GraphQL, I really don't know enough about it, but I think the biggest thing here will be because how much do you know about GraphQL?
Even though I work for a company that talks and sells GraphQL technologies, I know nothing other than it's a query language.
Right. I think the thing, if I understand correctly, the most important difference between SQL or NoSQL and GraphQL is that in SQL and NoSQL, the point of it is the data. So like the important information that you're trying to save and retrieve is the data itself. Where in GraphQL, it's the data, which is the node, but also the relationship between two different nodes. And those relationships can be named. So you can have a node that's like one node has another node, or it can be, one node is the parent of another node. And the nice thing about GraphQL is when these relationships, like what specific type of this relationship between the two exist. In SQL, you only have the same type of relationship. They somehow belong to each other. There's like a map of songs and artists, but these relationships don't have any other value besides they exist. Whereas in GraphQL, those relationships, you can give them value. They mean more than just two nodes are related. And if that is important, then GraphQL is a good choice. That's what I know about GraphQL. However, so basically, when you use GraphQL, I think a very important part of this data retrieval layer will be to translate from your business logic into the language of GraphQL, of nodes and relationships. And that's all I know. So I don't even know if it would make sense for us to use GraphQL for our particular use case? I guess not, because the relationships between things are fairly straightforward and not that complex. But yeah, I don't know. Like an example is, for example, if you have social media, GraphQL makes a lot of sense because two nodes can be connected by liking or retweeting or disliking. So there's a lot of different types of relationships that can exist between two nodes. Whereas with songs, karaoke songs, maybe not so much. There's also we're also going to have songs, but also we're going to have users probably. So that might get a bit more interesting with can a user actually, like a song or retrieve a song from, like add it to their playlist, or, that's going to be interesting to further develop if we want to. But I think the very, very basic functionality that our karaoke app just has to do is I click on a button, it gives me a random song out of the list of songs that it has. I think that's the very, very basic that you can start with.
I think, yeah, we'll start off there, and then at some point in time, we can evolve that to allow that user input to define or narrow down what particular song that they're going to get. Just looking at the fact that you just described NoSQL, GraphQL, clap, 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 awesome stuff.
That's what I know about it. It might not actually be true.
But I honestly don't know much about GraphQL, and I learned a little bit just in that few minutes that you described it. For the SQL stuff, I think that's probably our starting point. We'll have to use some form of SQL, MySQL, Postgres, whatever it is, just to create an initial, I guess, a repository of these songs. And then we can create, some sort of table that just has the name of the song, the artist, and then maybe the genre that it falls into. So at least we have a few categories that we can work off of. And then we can create queries as needed to just be able to find the data that we're looking for. It's going to be highly static initially, right? We're literally going to sit here and generate our own song lists and put them in there. And now we've got a system that'll view a random song. What's next after that? By the way,
I think
how do I get access? Sorry, I was going to ask, how do I get access to your drawings?
I don't think you can right now because I'm just drawing it in Procreate on my local machine, but I'm going to figure out a way that we can draw on this together. Probably need to find some shared service thing, but right now I'm just drawing it on my tablet. I'm going to export the image when we're done, and I'm going to put it in a repository. But I think the very first thing that we need to think about is what is our data model? I don't think Pamas is suggesting a Miro board, and probably mentioned that PyMaster works for a company named Miros. It's probably the reason why he's suggesting it. I don't know if I can draw simply on it with my pen though. But anyhow, I think that one of the first things we need to think about is the data model, the data structure. So if we're saying, okay, we have how familiar are you with SQL? Or how comfortable?
Not very. I'm not I will probably be I'd be the wrong decision to go for database advice.
But you understand how relationships between two different tables work, right? How do you create
at a very high level, being able to just capture and join data between the two tables and whatnot. Calling queries, that's not the thing, but maybe we can figure that out over the course of this. I do think though we need someone that knows this stuff pretty well to maybe tell us.
Yes, I'm still hoping to find someone to help us who is maybe not a white man, because I did get a couple of messages from folks who were saying I could help out, and I really appreciate it. I'm just hoping that maybe we can find someone who's not a white guy, because I would just really love it if we can, showcase that all kinds of people have this knowledge or can help us. And like, you don't even have to know these things, right? Like if you know how to find things out, how we can do the research and where to look, that's more than enough. I don't. It could be a student who just is very good at researching. I'm totally okay with that. So if you know someone, reach out to them, and like, you can watch our stream and just see that we barely know what we're doing either. Also, so no worries if you're not an expert on database admin or these kind of things. But yeah, what I was saying is just like we need to think about, like, okay, if we're doing SQL, what attributes should our songs have? Like, what are maybe, if we think about how to later make recommendations, how could we, like, what are the things that are important to us? So maybe like genre, maybe like artist. I mean, this is what I was thinking, like the gender of the artist, which is probably part of the artist, but whatever. Maybe yeah, I don't know, like genre, artist. We don't have to go through everything in detail right now, but I'm just thinking, like, what are things that we at a later point want to
We could
decide, like, yeah.
we could go for maybe decades, like
Oh, yeah, for sure. Just like yeah,
I mean, like if we want to be
just
ultra,
a year.
like there's
Yeah.
music that is created throughout the globe, throughout the world, right? There are different, styles of music. There's music that comes in different languages. Like we could even get to that level if we wanted to. It becomes a massive database. But I honestly feel like, there's a lot of songs that could probably go in here, like a ton from other parts of the world too.
Sure. Yeah, I was thinking about a way that we could, I can find that. I'm not actually sure, because I don't know if I'm logged into GitHub here. But oh wait, it's public anyhow. I was thinking about a way that we can create our database without having to crawl every single song in the world, because not every song is really, karaoke friendly. And I was looking at different music databases, and they're not good karaoke song databases. So I don't actually know if I'm going to be able to find the repository here. Oh god, it's going to take forever. Are you virtualized with the Z?
No, I have a different handle.
Oh, you
here.
distributed. Oh, dang it.
Distribute the 6.
Oh, the 6.
Yeah, without the D.
Oh, distribute. Oh, okay. Distribute. I just love that people are sending me messages right now. Okay, that was really close. I'm going to a rave tomorrow, so I have to activate my ticket. Why am I not?
Here, let me spell it out for you. So you got distribute. You need the full word distribute there.
Oh, distribute.
Yeah, and then you need,
then B.
And then you also need an I after the 6. What?
Still not right.
Distribute. Yeah, that's the repo. Oh my gosh. Let me look it up.
Okay, no, I can't find you. Sorry about that, folks. This is very poor.
Here we go. Can I drop it in the chat, and then you can?
Oh, can you just share your screen? Maybe this makes things easier.
Yeah.
Or you can drop it in the chat as well if you want to.
Sure. Let me present my. Actually, no. I'll drop it in the chat. Can you see that?
Okay. Yes.
Okay. Perfect.
Distribute this. Oh, that is exactly what it says here. Well, you didn't drop it. Well, you dropped. Yeah, that's fine.
Oh, sorry, wrong chat.
It's okay. It's not secret. Maybe if I just type out the entire thing. Oh, this is like a live demo where everyone is now watching you typing out stuff.
There it
Okay, here we
is.
go. So when I was playing around with it a little bit, I created this amazing. This is when I was still working on web development. These wireframes to kind of like think about how we would build up this this database. So again, that we don't crawl every single database, but only the songs that people actually would like to sing. And my idea was that if you are logged in as a user, you could have your own playlist. And let's just go with one playlist. Every user just has one playlist, and they can then decide, suggest me a song from my playlist or suggest a song from the entire pool of songs that we have. Like not every song in the world, but the songs that we have in our database. So the way it would be that you have the search field and you can search for a song. Obviously, you're going to search for I Don't Want to Miss a Thing. And because this song is already in our pool, I can just press that plus button and then can just add it to my playlist. And then it would look like this. Oh yeah, you've added it to a playlist. If the song that I'm looking for is not in this list of the songs that are already in our pool, I could like press the search for song button, and then we would go and we could like crawl through, for example, the Discogs API. And then we would see like a bunch of songs that we don't have in our pool yet. And you can like show more because it would be paginated and everything. So now maybe I'm like, oh yeah, I want the Descendants. I Don't Want to Grow Up. So I'm clicking that. And then I'm going to this form where I can like check if everything's correct. Yes, this is the song that I want. And then I can add to the playlist here. So when I'm adding to my playlist, I'm also adding to the general pool. So we're creating kind of like a user-based, like user content to some degree, but we're not letting users generate the content necessarily. We just use the users to missing the word right now, to kind of tell us which kind of content makes sense to have and which doesn't. That was the idea.
That works. I mean, you can go ahead and just merge it right into the main if you want.
Yeah, I can do that. I mean, I like put some, but this was my idea for NoSQL. So if we're gonna go for SQL, I mean, it's fine. It's pretty much doesn't really matter whether it's SQL or NoSQL for just the idea of the workflow and the idea of like what kind of data we want. So in here, I also have like the image URL, so we can like display the CD cover, for example. And we could like, if we have the playlist count, so how often have people added the song to their playlists, we could also rank that song higher in the suggestion list because we know most people like the song. So yeah, I can definitely merge that README if you want. Yeah. So user curation, yes, it is free work from passionate people. You know what? This is pretty much what companies like Google are doing. Like when you solve their captchas, they used that to train their machine learning algorithms. So yeah, this is how we do things now. All right.
It's interesting how we've gone about like architecting and whiteboarding what we're trying to do, and I think like a lot of what we just discussed is something that, you know, if you worked on the pre-sale side or solution architecture side, you might find yourself doing with a lot of customers too. So I honestly feel like this is a valuable skill to have, being able to draw out your ideas and plot them on some sort of board that people can actually use, see, and visualize for themselves what your idea is coming to be or become.
Yeah, 100%. This is like, I think this is a very, very important step, and I'm glad that we did this now before we really like go to the next step of like, oh, are we using containers, blah, blah. I think like a lot of times when, you work on something and then it doesn't scale, or you suddenly discover you made the wrong decision, it is more often than not because you didn't think about, like, people are too eager to make a decision immediately instead of just thinking about, this is a decision that I might need to make at some point. I'm going to defer it, but I know that I have to think about this later. So I'm trying to make things easy to change while not already trying to make a decision where I'm just lacking the information. This is like what Pimaster also said, like, it's difficult to make the right decision right now, but you need to like find the balance and make things easier for you. Yeah, Jackie's saying this is always the favorite part of building stuff. You know what? I think this is probably also my favorite part because everything's still possible. You haven't fucked anything up yet. You haven't made any decisions, which keeps you from doing the other cool stuff that, I mean, I would have loved to do something with GraphQL, but I just don't think it makes sense here. But like, all the possibilities are still there, and it's just super exciting. So yeah, fully. Oh, I think
I'm
you're
trying to unmute when I'm trying to do it when my kid's not screaming, but he's screaming. So, anyways, I totally agree, Jackie. There's like this fun part of trying to design a solution where you start to realize, like, now you're testing your own like limits, like how far can you go with this design? How much do you actually don't know about what you're trying to do? And I think like even through this exercise, I'm uncovering like maybe the approach of the right database, whether it's SQL or NoSQL, that will come up and bite us in the ass later on, potentially, whether it comes down to a performance related thing or whether we decide to scale appropriately. I'm going to go back on mute because my kid's screaming. I'm sure you all can hear that.
That's totally all right. Probably just super shocked that we're going with SQL right now. It's just like, no, I don't want to.
We could we could always pivot back to NoSQL because you've already written it for it, right?
Yeah.
So
I have not written anything so far. I mean, I've prototyped something, and that's totally all right. I mean, the whole point of prototyping is that you should not feel bad about throwing it away. That's super important. And I just wanted to add also that okay, now I just don't know what I wanted to add anymore. I get right, I remember. Making decisions not only based on, like, what's the cool technology or what would be the best technology to do that, but also looking at what can I afford? What do I already know? Like, there's so much stuff that I would like to do, but if I just like need to learn 3 new things at the same time, it's just not realistic for me to actually get to the point where I build something and then I just lose interest and motivation. If it takes me 3 weeks to build a website, it's not going to be fun. So I'm not going to do that. So it's totally okay to say, you know what, we're going to do SQL because we both have most experience in that technology, and it works. I mean, for an app like this, we could probably just like close our eyes and throw a dart, and we would probably be okay with any decision, unless you want to do F# or something. But like, this is a very, very kind of straightforward app that doesn't require a lot of like super specific technology, I don't think.
It really doesn't. It really doesn't. But yeah, I think this kind of brings us to the point that a good point to end and maybe consider and maybe even just quickly talk about what we plan to do next.
Yes. So, I mean, if we can find someone to help us with our data and database questions, that would be amazing. And if not, then we just have to like maybe do some research and discuss it amongst us. But I would think that the data part is probably the thing that I would like to tackle next. And then, yeah, I don't know. I don't want to think that far ahead. We should. I would suggest it. Let's just focus on the next episode, which will be probably next year by our current speed. But yeah, and then also if you have any suggestions or ideas or anything, you can, open an issue on GitHub or I don't know, discussion in the GitHub, whatever it is. I'm not quite sure. There's a way to start discussions in the GitHub wiki of a repository, I think. Anyhow, we're open to any kinds of suggestions. We, as I said, barely know what we're doing. So yeah, like anything will help.
Exactly. Come join us. Come ask us questions. Come stream with us. We're also here to learn too, right? Like we don't know everything.
Yes.
So
and also if you have a field of expertise that you think like you want to talk to us about, like we're totally open to that as well. Absolutely.
awesome.
All right.
Well,
Well, thanks
you,
all for
everyone.
joining us. This was super fun.
It was.
We're
It
gonna
was
see each
very fun.
other.
I'm glad we got to do this like this week before like the busy that starts next week, right?
Yeah. Well, we're gonna see each other again after KubeCon sometime, hopefully before the end of this year.
Hope so. All right. Well, thanks everyone for coming by.
Good day,
We will
everyone.
see y'all. Take care.